Hi, folks. This is Mark by Mark A. Foster, Ph.D., for the Institute for Dialectical Meta-Realism. Sorry, it has been a few days since I have done one of these podcasts, but I have an excuse, and I mentioned this briefly previously before I actually had my computer sent off. I was having some problems upgrading to Windows 11, and I delayed doing that because I really didn't want to, and now I realize it's not a big deal. Uh, just make sure you also get a copy of Start 11. Start 11 replaces the Windows 10 startup menu really, really well. Other than that, there's no problem with upgrading from Windows 10 to Windows 11, at least not so far. Also, I had problems with my sound for some reason. My sound card was not working properly. And so my friend George, who actually works at Best Buy, came over a couple of times in the last couple of days and worked on worked on getting my computer in shape. And so I do have those excuses, but I'm still sorry about it. I wanted to go back to talking about the horrendous crises in Gaza. It is admittedly very difficult for me to get that out of my mind. And as you can probably guess, if you've watched my podcast before, the reason I'm wearing glasses is because I am going to read you a story about an event which occurred in Gaza. It was reported by multiple media sources, so not just one. And so I will uh, briefly be looking away from the camera off and on as I read through this thing. And it is a real tragedy. I don't know what else can be said about it. It just shows the complete and utter corruption of the Zionist entity, that it is willing to do these things and apparently has no feeling of sorrow, no feeling of regret, no conscience, no moral compass, nothing. In fact, the Israeli Defense Forces seem to be gleeful about doing these kinds of things. And the vast majority of Israeli citizens support it. I don't understand it, but it's I mean, even when my autism was much greater than it is now, before I was given the gift of empathy about 20 years ago, I still could not have imagined this. Literally incomprehensible. Okay, this is from Al Jazeera. The headline, all too familiar: Massacre. Dozens killed by Israeli fire in Gaza while collecting food aid. And the subtitle is more than 100 killed and about 750 wounded after Israeli forces fired at Palestinians trying to get flour for their families as famine stalks the Gaza Strip. Were those families Hamas? Is that what Netanyahu was going to claim? That he was killing off Hamas by killing families who were waiting in line to get food? Okay, let me continue. More than 100 Palestinians have been killed and some 700 others wounded after Israeli troops opened fire on hundreds waiting for food aid southwest of Gaza City, health officials say, as the besieged enclave faces an unprecedented hunger crisis. I mean, what if this were happening in Jerusalem or in Tel Aviv or in Haifa? What would be the reaction of the international community to that? I can only speculate, but I imagine it would be much different than what we are seeing right now. The Gaza Ministry of Health said on Thursday that at least 112 people were killed and more than 750 were wounded, with the Palestinian Ministry of Foreign Affairs condemning what it said was a cold-blooded massacre. And I hope that what any human being, and by human beings, I am excluding the Israeli government and the Israeli Defense Forces, a massacre. The ministry said that the attack was Israel's ongoing genocidal war. I would call it personally the Holocaust of the 21st century. If I were still teaching classes, if I had not retired, that's what I would call it. And I would preface it by saying that I come from an Ashkenazi Jewish family. And why are people, many of whom have relatives who died in the Holocaust of the 20th century, perpetrating a new Holocaust? Now, I assume I have distant relatives who died in the Holocaust, but they are very distant because my family came to the United States at the turn of the 20th century, long before World War II and the first Holocaust in Germany and surrounding countries. So I don't know. I guess I could find out if I wanted to do a search at ancestry.com, maybe. But I don't know. But I would assume that I must have some relatives, probably distant cousins, who died in the Holocaust of the 20th century. Okay. It called on the international community to urgently intervene to forge a ceasefire as the only way to protect civilians. People had congregated at Al Rashid Street, where aid trucks carrying flour were believed to be on the way. Al Jazeera verified footage showing the bodies of dozens of killed and wounded Palestinians being carried onto trucks as no ambulances could reach the area. My question is, why could no ambulances reach the area? Well, we know from the past that ambulances themselves have been bombed by the Israeli Defense Forces. Whether that was the case here, I don't know. This is a quotation. We went to get flour. The Israeli army shot at us. There are many martyrs, in Arabic is shahideen, on the ground. And until this moment, we are withdrawing them. There is no first aid, said one witness. Reporting from the scene, Al Jazeera's Ismail Aqol said that after opening fire, Israeli tanks advanced and ran over many of the dead and injured bodies. How was that going to wipe out Hamas? Even if they believed, absurdly, of course, that those people were Hamas, what is the point of running over dead bodies? It is a massacre on top of the starvation threatening citizens in Gaza, he said. The dead and wounded have been taken to 4 medical centers: Al-Shifa, Kemal Adwan, Ali, and the Jordanian hospitals. Ambulances could not reach the area as the roads had been totally destroyed, said Al-Qul. Well, that's the answer why there were no roads. No roads. The numbers will rise. Hospitals are no longer able to accommodate the huge number of patients because they lack fuel, let alone medicine. Hospitals have also run out of blood. Reporting from occupied East Jerusalem, Al Jazeera's Bernard Smith said the Israeli military initially tried to pin the blame on the crowd. On the crowd? Initially, saying that dozens were hurt as a consequence of being crushed and trampled when aid trucks arrived. They're blaming the deaths on the aid trucks. That's what Israel is doing. That's what the Zionist state is doing. Rather than taking responsibility for their own homicides, they're blaming it on the aid trucks. And then after pushing the Israelis, after some pushing, the Israelis went on to say that their troops felt threatened, that hundreds of troops approached their troops in a way that posed a threat to them. So they responded by opening fire, Smith added. That reminds me of American police and how historically all American police need to do is to say that they felt threatened. And they too have used that as an excuse for killing innocents. The United States has asked Israel to provide answers. And when they provide answers, what will the US do? Nothing. Nothing. If their history can be relied upon, history does not repeat itself, but as the expression goes, it rhymes. I don't know what the rhyme will be. Well, at least they're asking Israel, the Zionist state, to provide answers and ensure the safe delivery of aid to Gaza. We have been in touch with the Israeli government. I don't even like saying Israeli or Israel, because that kind of gives it credibility as a country, as a reputable country, which it is not. Since early this morning, and understand that an investigation is underway. Yeah, right. An investigation by the Zionist state of its own actions? We will be monitoring the investigation closely and pressing for answers. Yeah, and then what? After you press for answers, what if Netanyahu says no answers will be forthcoming? Or what if the answers are so absurd that no person of any reason would accept them? Then what will you do, Joe Biden? This next section of the article is called Beyond Words. One Palestinian man told Quds news network the military attack was a crime. I have been waiting since yesterday. At about 4:30 this morning, trucks started to come through. Once we approached the aid trucks, the military tanks and warplanes started firing at us as if it was a trap. It was a trap. It was a trap. As if, look, it's nice that that man is being generous and putting as if in there. I would not be that generous. As if it was a trap. To the Arab states, I say, if you want to have us killed, why are you sending relief aid? If this continues, we do not want any aid delivered at all. Every convoy means another massacre. Jadallah al-Shafi'i, the head of the nurses department at Al-Shifa Hospital, said that the situation is beyond words, adding that the hospital was flooded with dozens of dead bodies and hundreds of injured. The majority of the victims suffered gunshots and shrapnel in the head and upper parts of their bodies. They were hit by direct artillery shelling, drone missiles, and gun firing, he told Al Jazeera. Next, subheading, systematic attacks. The mass shooting was the latest instance of systematic attacks on hungry people waiting for scraps of food. Hamas? Over the past few days, Palestinians gathered in large groups, waiting for aid trucks on Salah al-Din Street near Gaza City, and have been shot by Israeli forces, said Al Jazeera's Hani Mahmoud, reporting from Rafah in the enclave's south. Recently, a truck that was supposed to deliver aid to people in Gaza tragically turned into the truck carrying those injured and killed, he added. I guess that's the fog of war. But whose war? The war of the Zionist entity, not the war of Palestine. Palestine can't fight back. Not yet, anyway. With aid agencies unable to deliver supplies to northern Gaza since January 23rd, many are taking a long trek towards the south by foot. I don't envy any of them, because it seems as though as soon as people begin going in a certain direction in Gaza, they are killed. They are killed. The IDF sees where they are going. They don't care whether they're Hamas. To them, all Gazans, all Palestinians are Hamas. That is one thing that I wish the Western media would get its head screwed on right about. That when Israel says Hamas, it means Palestinians. It means Gazans. It is simply another word for the same thing. Israel doesn't care who is a member of Gaza. I'm sorry, of Hamas. They don't care. They don't know. They are literally monsters. Pure-blooded monsters. Okay, next subheading. It's hard for me to read this, to be honest. You can probably tell. It's very, very difficult because I think about this all the time. All the time. I dream about it. I dream about it. It occupies my thoughts almost every waking moment of my life, and apparently most sleeping moments of my life as well. Famine. On Wednesday, Carl Sakow, Deputy Executive Director of the World Food Program, told the United Nations Security Council that more than 500,000, which is 500,000, or 1 in 4 people, were at risk of famine, with 1 in every 6 children below the age of 2 considered acutely malnourished. The risk of famine is being fueled by the inability to bring critical food supplies into Gaza in sufficient quantities, and the almost impossible operating conditions faced by our staff on the ground, he said. He described dangerous conditions for the World Food Program, which is here abbreviated as the WFP. Trucks trying to get food to the north earlier this month. There were delays at checkpoints. At checkpoints? That's what they care about? They don't care about feeding people, keeping people alive. They care about checkpoints. They faced gunfire and other violence. Food was looted along the way. And at their destination, they were overwhelmed by desperately hungry people, said Scow. Aid agencies claim that Israel has been delaying deliveries. You don't say. That's not in the text. Those are my words. You don't say. Israel denies that charge. Yeah, right. It submitted a report to the International Court of Justice, the ICJ, on the measures taken to avert suffering in the besieged enclave. Rights groups say Israel acted in breach of the ICJ order issued in January. Philippe Lazzarini, the head of UNRWA, which is the UN agency for Palestinian refugees, said on Sunday on social media that calls to allow food distribution in Gaza amid the ongoing hostilities between Israel and Hamas have been denied or have fallen on deaf ears. I would say probably both. Most likely both of those are true. Warning against looming famine. The UN official said that the situation was becoming a man-made disaster. It's not a natural disaster. Not natural. It's not natural. It's a disaster driven by pure hatred. Israel launched a deadly offensive on the Gaza Strip following a Hamas-led attack on October 7th. More than 30,000 people are reported to have been killed to date, mostly women and children. That's the article. That's the article from Al Jazeera. And what is there that anyone can say about it? I mean, I don't know what to say. And but I will say this. I love Judaism. I love the religion of Judaism. I had a close friend who was a Hasidic Jew for a brief time. Then he left it and then went on to Wall Street and made billions, actually, in his case. Lucky guy, Jay. We are still friends on LinkedIn, but I haven't seen him in many years. He and his entire family are strong Zionists. Strong Zionists. How could a human being alive right now be a strong Zionist? The problem is that where I'm living, in the Rio Grande Valley of Texas, a couple of miles from Mexico, literally right down the road, one road, Bryan Road, and you cross over the bridge, and there you are in Mexico. There are, for all intents and purposes, no Jews where I am living. There is a Reformed temple in McAllen, which is right next to Mission. So I assume that there must be some Jews somewhere, but they're not visible. There are no anti-Zionist or Zionist protests taking place in this area, and I watch for it. That's something I'm always on the lookout for. Nothing is taking place here. That tells me one of two things. Either there literally are no Jews in this area who care, which is a possibility, or that the Jews who care don't know what to do, which is also a possibility. Now, I am from a Jewish family, as I mentioned, although that is not the religion which I practice, although I will not mention that here. I'm very proud of my religion, but I feel like combining that with these podcasts would be inappropriate. But I still love Judaism, and I despise Zionism. Many people would see those two things as a contradiction, but that's because they have not studied the history of the American Jewish community, which is really where Zionism took off. If it were not for the United States, it is questionable, not entirely impossible, but questionable as to whether there would be a Zionist entity right now. since it was the US that passed the deciding vote in the UN Security Council, which authorized the establishment of the Zionist state. So I feel at a loss. I still want to be proud to be Jewish. Jews have a wonderful history. And although I don't practice that religion, I mean, it's my heritage. My family was not Yiddishkeit, meaning they did not practice what is could be ordinarily translated as Jewishness, Yiddishkeit, Jewishness. There was no real Jewish ceremonialism in my home. My family, we never ate traditional Jewish food, except when we went to our grandparents, who occasionally would cook it. But myself, no, my family was not Yiddishkeit. Certainly my family really was not interested in Judaism. But my parents were nominal Zionists, not strict ones. And I question whether if they were alive today, they've been dead for a long time, decades, they would still be even nominal Zionists. I would like to think that they would not be, but of course, I have no way of knowing that. I do know that my sister, like myself, is an anti-Zionist, and I'm very proud of her for that. I am proud whenever I meet somebody of Jewish ancestry who is an anti-Zionist. And yet, my being proud of anti-Zionism is not going to help the suffering masses in Gaza. Nothing will help the suffering masses in Gaza, because nobody with any power seems to be willing to do that. Even the Gulf states, which adjoin the Palestinian territories, are not helping Gaza at all, meaning they're not bringing about an end to the war. In fact, if anything, they are still working with Israel to an extent, maybe not as much as they were before, but they're not opposing Israel. They haven't demanded that Israel stop what it's doing. It's all a complete and total tragedy, travesty. There is nothing really that can be said. I realize that I repeat myself when I make these podcasts. So if you think I didn't know that, no, I know that. And I'm sorry for doing that. But I don't think that repetition is bad in this case. I think it is important that people of Jewish ancestry on both sides of my family, as far as I know, 100%, although there's probably nobody who's 100% anything, but as far as I know, 100%, speak out against the Zionist entity, speak out in favor of the Palestinians living in Gaza. So that's why I do it. I do it basically to make my voice known, to establish myself as some sort of a voice for peace, a retired sociology professor with a Ph.D. who has some knowledge of these things, My PhD doesn't matter. I could care less about it. If somebody just threw it in the trash, I could care less. But having the PhD gives me some level of knowledge of what is happening right now in Gaza. It gives me a theoretical framework, critical realism, which is my theoretical framework in sociology, to dissect the kinds of demi-reality which dominates and pervades the lands of Gaza. And so if my PhD could help me do that, I am grateful. But the fact that I go back and I watch my podcasts and I see how depressed and sad I look. To wrap this up, I will simply say that is not an act. Okay? That is not an act. That is literally how I feel. I went to acting school for a long time when I thought I would become a professional actor at an earlier stage of my life. When I was a teenager, then I changed to radio and then sociology, and the rest, as they say, is history. But I'm not that good of an actor. I mean, I wasn't a bad actor in acting school. The best thing I did was my voice. In fact, my nickname in acting school was The Voice. And interestingly enough, the first radio job I had, my nickname was also The Voice. So that's what I did the best. But I'm not a bad actor, especially improvisational theater. But no one, in my opinion, could be a good enough actor. I'm holding back tears. No one could be a good enough actor to have the kind of feeling that I have in my heart right now for the people of Gaza. And I only wish, although wishes are a fantasy, so maybe I shouldn't even use the word wish, but what the heck. I can only wish that more people living in the Zionist entity, or for those who prefer living in Israel, to oppose what the Likud party and the parties to its right are doing right now in Gaza. My question is where the hell is the Labor Party? I realize that they have no real power and haven't for quite a while in Israel. But why aren't they speaking out more vociferously against it? They're not. They're not. Little peeps is all I hear. For the time being, this is Mark by Mark A. Foster, Ph.D., for the Institute for Dialectical Metarealism. Have a pleasant day and an even better day tomorrow.